The Banana Box DAW plugin is included with any purchase of Banana Box 2021 and allows you to use many of the great features in Banana Box right in your favorite DAW, such as Cakewalk, Reaper, Pro Tools, Presonus, and many more. Just like in the main program, all you need to do is enter chords, pick a style, set the tempo, generate the tracks, and then you have all these great sounding tracks made by Banana Box right in your favorite DAW. Right now I'm working in GarageBand and I've just added the plugin and I'm ready to start making music. So first of all, I want to pick a style. I'd like to try a contemporary country style, so I'll filter by that. Just like in the main Banana Box program, you can sample the styles by double-clicking. And I think I like this Ice Lake style. And I'll give my song a working name, On the Icy Lake. Before I start entering chords, this whole top part of the plugin has very important stuff in it, but none of it is particularly relevant to the chords I'm about to enter. There are new views available, Track Table and Chord Sheet View. And clearly this will be the best view for entering chords. And also another new feature is the ability to hide even all of this. So I'll enter some chords. Also, in the past you've been able to display with Nashville notation or other chord type methods, but now there's a new option to have multiple types show at once. So I'm going to have it show both standard and Nashville notation at the same time. Incidentally, the main display default can now be set in the preferences. You can also enter chords with Nashville numbers too. I'll copy those 16 bars. And another new feature is that copying now also copies the part markers. So my A and B markers at bars 1 and 9 have been copied down here to 17 and 25 as well. So now the song is finished. I'll set the tempo to 93, and I'll set that tempo in GarageBand as well. So now I'll generate the tracks themselves. A couple of other new features with this rendering process are that rendering is faster than in previous versions of the program. The default bit depth rendering is 24-bit, and the highest quality of tempo stretching for Elastique is used when rendering. So rendering is now complete, and I'll drag the tracks into the DAW where I can play them back, edit them further, or record my own additional tracks. And I can do that either from the track table view or the tracks and chords view. You'll also notice that the file names of the individual audio can be seen in the tracks. In the past, these file names were a little more cryptic, whereas now the names are much more user-friendly, with the song name, real track's number, the full real track's name, and the tempo. We're now going to look at some other new features and different ways to use the plugin. I've switched to a different DAW, Reaper, for this part, and I've got the plugin loaded up and the demo song for Bravo Cool Gospel style loaded here. And I've just generated the tracks. This one now has a combination of MIDI tracks and real tracks, with real tracks bass, drums, and guitar, and MIDI piano. And rather than dragging the tracks in like I did in GarageBand earlier, I'm instead going to just have these tracks played directly from the plugin itself. Now there are two ways you can play tracks right in the plugin. One, play them in the plugin without the DAW doing anything, or two, start playback in the DAW and have the tracks then automatically sync to that. First we'll look at playing them in the plugin without the DAW playing. I can start playback in the DAW just by double-clicking on any bar. The play and stop up here control playback within the DAW, and the area that was used as an indicator during track generation doubles as a timeline indicator for playback within the plugin. Right now we're listening to a stereo mix of the generated tracks, but we can also hear and mix the tracks within here individually. And another exciting feature is I can turn these track labels into volume sliders, so I can mix the tracks as well. Now, as I mentioned, the second way you can play the tracks from right within the plugin is if you play from within the DAW and have the tracks sync up to that. This is very useful because then you can have your own recorded tracks in the DAW and play them back, but with that playback triggering these Band in a Box tracks as well, having them sync to your parts. First of all, I want the DAW to have the same tempo as the Band in a Box tracks. I could just go and change the Reaper tempo to 75, but there's a great new feature that creates a MIDI track with chords and a tempo map, and you access that feature with this C7 button in the lower right corner. There are settings for this feature which can be accessed with a right click. It will create chord labels, but can also generate a MIDI click track or MIDI block chords. There are also options here to save and load chords from MIDI files. All of these options include tempo events, so I just want tempo and chords, so I'll leave the first one selected. And I can just drag from here into the chord chart. I do want it to set the tempo, but in Reaper, markers in MIDI files show up right in the track, so I don't need additional markers at the top, so I'll leave that unchecked. And we can see this very useful track with chords displaying throughout the timeline. And of course, it set the tempo. So now that the tempo of the DAW matches the tempo of the plugin, I'm going to click on the upper area of the sync button, turning this blue, which indicates that it will sync with the DAW's playback. So now I can start playback in the DAW, and the audio is playing in the plugin. And even playing this way, this mixing within the plugin still affects the sound. Another approach to still using the plugin for playback is to route the audio and MIDI from here to different tracks. The plugin will still be playing the tracks, but you'll be able to control them and apply other plugins and effects to the individual tracks they're routed to. These blue labels indicate the audio channels where the audio is being sent, which by default is 1 and 2, or basically just the left and right channels of the track where the plugin actually resides. So all of these tracks are just playing back right now through the same track. But if I click on them, I can change them. For example, I'll leave the bass alone, but I'll send the drums to channel 3 and 4 instead. The guitar I'll send to 5 and 6. If I play now, I'm no longer hearing the drums and guitar, because they're no longer on the left-right channels of this track, channels 1 and 2. So I can create and designate tracks to accept these audio channels. So first of all, I'll create 2 new tracks, and I'll title them Drums and Guitar. And for that matter, to avoid confusion, I'll also give names to these 2 tracks, BB Plugin and Chords. On the new drums track, I'll click on the routing button. I'll set it to receive audio from this track that has my new track label, BB Plugin, which is basically the entire plugin and all the tracks on it, but from that track I only want audio channels 3 and 4, which I've designated as the drums. So now if I play back, I'm hearing the bass right from the plugin track, and I've routed the drums to this new track, but still no guitar. So I'll do the same with the guitar, but with audio channels 5 and 6. And you can also do this with MIDI tracks. Right now the plugin has been playing back audio renders of the MIDI for those 2 MIDI SuperTracks tracks because I had this setting off in preferences. But if I enable it, now the plugin will actually be sending and playing MIDI. Incidentally, you may have noticed changes in the prefs here. They're now better organized with these handy tabs. You also may have noticed the chord font was different in this part of the video than it was earlier. The chord font is now settable here in prefs. So now I can do a similar thing to MIDI that I did with audio. I can route MIDI playback to other tracks as well. I'll make 2 new tracks and I'll label them piano and pads, because piano 2 here is a held part, so it would work well with a pads kind of sound. On the piano track, I'll set it to receive from the band in a box track, no audio, but MIDI channel 3. And for pads, I'll set it to receive no audio, but MIDI channel 6. If I play now, I won't hear anything from those tracks because MIDI has to actually be playing through some kind of sound generator or synthesizer. So I'll put Sforzando on the piano 1 track, and I think I'd like a vintage electric piano sound playing for that one. And for the pads, I really like the electro flute sound, so I'll use that. And now I can add individual additional plugins to the different tracks. I'll add some reverb to the guitar, and some tremolo to the electric piano. Earlier in the video, we saw how you could copy chords and whole songs between the main Band in a Box program and text files. You can also copy chords between the main program and the Band in a Box plugin. For example, if I press Command-C in Band in a Box, in the plugin I can right-click and select Edit, Paste, and we have the chords from the main program here. And the reverse is true. I can select a region of chords from the plugin, copy, and paste into Band in a Box. And you can also copy whole songs. In the main Band in a Box program, I can go to Edit, Copy Special, copy songs to text on clipboard or file, and copy the whole song to the clipboard. And then in the plugin, I can select Paste Special. Then not only are the chords in here, but it's entered the title, style, form, and everything. And finally, we're going to look at the plugin being used to add band-in-a-box tracks to an existing recording. I have a recording of the old folk song Down by the Sally Gardens with a vocal line and an acoustic guitar part. Now, these were not recorded to a click track, and the performance gradually speeds up naturally from the beginning to the end. But earlier in the video, we used the audio chord wizard in the main band-in-a-box program to create a tempo map of the performance and to figure out the chords for the whole song. And we saved that in a band-in-a-box file. So I'm going to add the plugin to open that file and use it to generate tracks to go along with this. Before I open that file though, I want to change something in the preferences. I don't really use the style mix that much, so I'm going to take advantage of a new feature to turn that off by default. So now the file is loaded, and we can see all the tempo changes in this file that were inserted by the Audio Chord Wizard feature, with the song starting off around 90 beats per minute and ending around 93. And again, I'll use this great new feature to drag a chord track into the DAW, which enters all of those tempo changes into the DAW. And now this performance is lined up to the grid in Reaper. So now I'd like to find a style to go along with this. So I'll open the style picker. So it's even 16ths based, close to 90 beats per minute. And I'm thinking of maybe using a modern pop style with this. And I'll try sampling this indie electric guitar hip hop beat, which looks like it's from the new Extra Styles Pack 10. And yeah, sure, I'll give that a try. I'll generate, and while it's generating, I'll add some tracks that we can route to. Synth bass, drums, and guitar. And I'll also label the plugin tracks to avoid confusion. And the chords track. And I'll match the routing in the plugin track with the new tracks. Synth bass, 3 and 4. Synth drums, 5 and 6. Electric guitar, 7 and 8. I'll turn on sync and press play in the DAW. And we now have all these tracks playing along with our existing vocals and guitar. Now, most DAWs can do a similar kind of routing with these tracks, and the part in the plugin will be exactly the same for those as I showed you here. The part in the DAW itself will be similar but may differ in some ways, so it's generally good to familiarize yourself with the routing procedures of whatever DAW you're working in. Now, when you drag tracks into the DAW, which I didn't do here, it's often then best when you save the Reaper session, or again, whatever DAW you're working in, to let the DAW move the audio files to the location of where you're saving the session. But if you're playing back the tracks from the plugin like this, it's best to save the song from the plugin and then let Band-in-a-Box move the tracks to the location of that song file, since it's the Band-in-a-Box plugin that needs to reference these when you open it again, not the DAW. So I'm going to save as, I'll save it as Sally Gardens with modern pop tracks. And this is a new feature where it prompts you to move all media into the project directory, and I'll say yes. And here is the file I just saved, and here is the folder containing the tracks. And again, with much more user-friendly file names than we've had in the past. Now, if I save the Reaper session without copying or moving any audio, If I press New, then open the same session, the plugin is referencing the location where those audio files were saved, and we can just pick up where we left off. And there are lots of other new features as well. There's a chord builder that can be used to enter and sample different chords as an option to just typing them in. There are options to preview chord progressions with just block chords so you can sample the progressions as you're entering them. And there are also options to save and load scrap chord progression ideas. There's a button in Preferences to view the log of green and yellow flash messages. There's a line between the Generate and Custom buttons, just making it clear those are separate items. There's a global bar offset, so if you want the music to start playing much further in your DAW, for example if you have a long rubato intro, you can set that so the bar display will still sync up. There's a new option to generate all ungenerated tracks. You can set the action for a new session, including setting a specific default style. And there's an option to highlight bar only during playback, but not, for example, just when you're clicking in the DAW. We hope you enjoy all of the great new features in the Band-in-a-Box DAW plugin for Mac, as well as the amazing new features in the Band-in-a-Box 2021 for Mac main program. Thanks for watching and have fun!